Thank you for joining me. This is Jeff Butts, Superintendent of the Metropolitan School District of Wayne Township. Over the past several weeks, I've had the opportunity to present information about the financial future of Wayne Township schools in 2013 and beyond. We are experiencing a decline in revenue, but while working together, we can reduce our expenditures to make sure that we continue to offer opportunities for success for every child in the Metropolitan School District of Wayne Township. Throughout this presentation, you'll learn more information about the finances of our district and about why our revenues are declining. In a single word, our financial future is challenging. We've seen several changes and reductions of revenue since 2007, and while we've reduced our expenses, it has not been enough. Future reductions are developing at a rate that was not predicted or planned for. However, as we do make future reductions, which must be made, we must reflect the priorities of our district and our community. Those changes must be sustainable and reoccurring. They must include cost shifting and shifting in cash balances, and most certainly they will impact all areas of our operations. So what has happened to cause this declining revenue? You may recall in 2007, the Indiana legislature instituted the circuit breaker, which became a constitutional amendment. As a homeowner, I loved the circuit breaker. It reduced my taxes greatly, but it also reduced revenues for those entities that are dependent upon property tax. Currently in Indiana, homesteads pay 1%, rental properties pay 2%, and businesses pay 3% of their assessed valuation. From 2007 through 2012, a span of 5 years, the circuit breaker impact for Wayne Township has been $23 million. However, in 2013, we face an $11.6 million reduction. We have reduced our expenditures by almost $10 million over the last 5 years, but it's not enough. In the spring of 2012, we learned that our assessed valuation in Wayne Township has declined almost 10%. With that reduction in our assessed valuation and the circuit breaker caps, our revenue has dropped dramatically. Let's begin with how schools are funded. Schools are funded both from a state basic grant and from local property taxpayers. In 2008, the state of Indiana took over the general fund, also known as the basic grant. This basic grant is dependent upon the number of students enrolled in the school district on count day in September. Prior to 2008, 25% of the general fund came from local property tax, and the other 75% came from the state. In 2007, Indiana implemented the circuit breaker, which we spoke of before. Those property tax funds generated by local property tax include the Capital Projects Fund, the Debt Service Fund, the Pension Debt Service Fund, the Transportation Fund, and the Bus Replacement Fund. It's important to note that each one of these funds are each like silos. The monies within those silos may not be transferred from one fund to another, or what's known as fungibility. If there's a balance in one fund and another fund does not have the money to cover expenses, monies may not be shifted from one silo to another. So what do these funds cover? Well, if you recall, the general fund comes from student enrollment, dollars that we earn for the number of students in our school district. Within the general fund, fully supported by the state basic grant, 93% are salaries and benefits, or they cover people. While we do have a few salaries in our Capital Projects Fund, which is funded through local property taxes, the Capital Projects Fund takes care of building maintenance, technology, utilities, and equipment. Another property tax supported fund is the Debt Service Fund. That covers the bonds we have on all of the buildings that we have renovated or built over the last 20 years. That's similar to our mortgage. The Pension Debt Service Fund is also funded by property taxes, and those cover retirement benefits for employees who have retired. Our Transportation Fund and Bus Replacement Fund, again, are both funded through property taxes, and they do just what they say. Our Transportation Fund allows us to transport students safely to and from school and also events. And our Bus Replacement Fund replaces buses. Buses are replaced now on a 12-year cycle instead of a 10-year cycle as it was several years ago. While we are allowed to continue to operate our buses for 2 additional years, there is an increased maintenance cost when those buses are on the road for longer periods of time. But we do not have the expense of purchasing a new bus. Student enrollment is a critical piece to the general fund or state basic grant. The Metropolitan School District of Wayne Township receives approximately $6,000 for students enrolled on count day in September. And over the past many years, we've continued to see an increase in student enrollment. However, in 2012, we saw a decline in student enrollment by nearly 330 students. While it's still too early to determine whether this is a trend, we do need to monitor this over the next several years. Even though we had a decline in our student enrollment, we did have an increase in our ADM, or average daily membership. That increase was due to 2 factors. One was the fully funding of the kindergarten grant, which gave us an additional 0.25 for each kindergarten student, and that's approximately $1,300 in the Metropolitan School District of Wayne Township. Now, while kindergartners are not funded at the full $6,000 level, this increase, along with the number of students we have from our desegregation area, allowed us to maintain our funding for the 2012-13 school year, even though we saw a decline in student enrollment. When we consider the revenues in our property tax supported funds, assessed valuation, or the value of property, becomes a critical piece. We already know in 2013 to experience an 8 to 10% decline in our assessed valuation. And it's predicted that that assessed valuation will continue to decline for 4 or more years. In 2003, property taxes for properties that are within the boundaries of the M.S.D. of Wayne Township were $3.29 billion. In 2012, the assessed valuation is $2.45 billion. And in 2017, it's estimated that our assessed valuation will be $1.8 billion. It's also important to note that of all of the municipalities in Marion County, the Metropolitan School District of Wayne Township had the greatest impact due to declining assessed valuation. This chart illustrates the change in gross real assessed valuation between 2007 and 2013 as compared to several other school districts in Marion County. You will notice between 2007 and 2013, the gross real assessed valuation in Wayne Township schools had the greatest decline. Other districts included are Decatur Township, Speedway, Pike Township, Indianapolis Public Schools, and Marion County. When we add in the circuit breaker, you'll notice that in 2009, the Metropolitan School District saw a dramatic decrease in property tax collections. You'll still note that the Metropolitan School District of Wayne Township has the greatest decline from 2007 to 2013. Again, other school districts have been included for comparison. As property taxes are collected each year, how are those taxes distributed within the boundaries of the M.S.D. of Wayne Township? Under the circuit breaker, approximately 50% of the taxes go to the Metropolitan School District of Wayne Township. Also receiving property tax dollars, in light blue at the top is the public library. In light green is Indigo. In the maroon, Wayne Township Government. In dark green, the Marion County Hospital. Pink is the Conservation District. And blue is Marion County. It's important to understand that as all of these entities bump up against the circuit breaker cap, the reduction in property tax collections is proportional to the percentage of property tax received. Currently, Wayne Township schools collect 60 cents on the dollar because of the circuit breaker impact. Each year, while preparing our budget, the Metropolitan School District of Wayne Township levies taxes deemed necessary to perform the operations within our tax-supported funds. In this chart, you'll see a comparison of property taxes that are levied by school districts close to Wayne Township, including Decatur Township, Speedway, Pike Township, and Indianapolis Public Schools. Earlier in this presentation, I referred to the circuit breaker loss over the past 5 years between 2009 and 2012 of $23 million. This chart illustrates the loss for each year between 2009 and 2017. You'll note that in 2013, our expected loss is $11.64 million. As our assessed valuation continues to decline in each year, our circuit breaker loss continues to increase. And in 2017, our circuit breaker loss will be $14.1 million. The reason for the large disparity in circuit breaker loss is explained in this chart. In 2009, the state had a circuit breaker replacement grant that covered 93% of the circuit breaker loss. But today, that replacement grant no longer exists. And in 2012, the circuit breaker reduction in property tax revenues for the Metropolitan School District of Wayne Township was 22%. Over the past 20 years, every school in the Metropolitan School District of Wayne Township has been touched by either a renovation or new construction project. With each individual project, a 1028 hearing was held before the Board of Education. Once the project was approved, bonds were sold, and an additional tax was levied upon property owners in the M.S.D. of Wayne Township. After the circuit breaker, those additional levies were no longer permitted. We were only allowed to collect the property tax within the circuit breaker cap. However, our debt service payments did not change. In 2013, our debt service payment is just over $23 million, increasing to approximately $25 million in 2022 and reducing to approximately $22 million in 2025. Our debt service payments will be made through 2029 and then reducing to approximately $2 million in 2030. Our current outstanding bonds total $270 million. With interest, that amount is $390 million. And in 2013, the circuit breaker impact may not negatively impact our debt service, meaning that with the monies that are generated through property tax collections, we must fully fund our debt service. This will reduce the property taxes available for our capital projects fund, our transportation fund, and our bus replacement fund.